Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for this webinar on the Truman Scholarship. My name is Kate. I am the National Scholarships and Fellowships Advisor for the University of West Georgia in the Office of Undergraduate Research at the Honors College. I'm excited to share some information about Truman with you. A lot of this information does come directly from the Truman website, though I think it's important that we talk through some of the aspects of the scholarship program, and then of course you can go to the website if there's anything else that you need, or please do send me an email with any questions at all that you have. My email address is here on the screen. It's kate@westga.edu. So let's dive right into Truman. Just a little bit of background on the Truman Foundation. President Truman did not want an actual bricks and mortar monument in his name. He wanted a living monument, a living memorial. So he created this scholarship foundation. There are Truman scholars doing all sorts of cool things. You can see kind of a list here in this third bullet point of some of the things that they're doing. You'll note some Truman scholars sitting on the Supreme Court. There are many Truman scholars throughout all different facets of public service. So from law to nonprofits to education, all sorts of different things. Probably the most notable Truman scholar at the moment in Georgia would be Stacey Abrams, though if you Google a list of past Truman scholars, you'll see quite an impressive list there. And so this is a really cool group to join, a really prestigious group. We'll talk a little bit more in a minute about how students are selected for Truman, but this is a really amazing network of people to join as a Truman Scholar. So just a brief overview, kind of the 30-second version of what the Truman Scholarship is. Truman is awarded to juniors, so you'd have to be in your junior year to apply, who already demonstrate outstanding leadership skills, public service, and a strong academic record. And these are students who are change agents who want to go into some sort of public service. Now, public service is very broadly defined, so that could be some sort of government work, it could be nonprofit, it could be education, anything that kind of fits under that umbrella of public service. Truman gives you $30,000 for graduate or professional school, which is fantastic, but it goes well beyond the money. It comes with an incredible network, opportunities for internships, summer opportunities, leadership development activities. So there's a lot that comes along with Truman that you just can't get in any other way. You'll notice the deadlines here. The first deadline is usually in early to mid-January, kind of right after we've come back from classes, and that's that first application deadline. So a lot of students know by October or November that they want to apply for a Truman, and they really start drafting and they're ready to have that application completed by January. So the process for applying for a Truman, each school can nominate up to 4 applicants for Truman. So we want all students who are interested in Truman to let me know as soon as you know that this is something you want to do in the fall, and I'll release the complete application to you as long as you're qualified to apply for a Truman. So all students who are qualified to apply can have access to the application and will work with me to make a complete application that is ready to submit by that early to mid-January campus deadline that we have set. And that includes everything. So that is a completed application, rec letters, transcripts, everything by that January deadline. And then there's a faculty committee that will review all of the applicants we receive to see who will get those campus nominations. And like I said, we can nominate up to 4. Once a student is notified that they are receiving that UWG nomination, we'll go through one more round of edits and updates to your completed application so that you can send it on to Truman by that early February deadline. So that's why there's a couple weeks between, you can see on this slide, between the January deadline that we have and Truman's actual deadline early in February. So this is a quick overview of the application. It looks long because I did go ahead and list all 14 of the application questions. I'm not going to read those and go over those in depth with you now, but if you want to pause this and really look through or want to check it out on the Truman website, you can see a sample of an application there. Basically, there are some application type questions, what you would think of, where did you go to college, where did you go to high school, that sort of thing. But most of these require short essays, and there are character limits on each of them. They're usually about 1 to 2 paragraphs, and we will draft your answers to all 14 of these questions. And usually I go through several drafts with applicants before that January deadline, because we want these applications to be the best that they can possibly be. We'll talk about that on another slide here in a moment as well. But we do draft all 14 of these questions. In addition to these application questions, there is a policy proposal and recommendation letters, so we'll talk about each of those. The policy proposal has to relate to a problem that you identified earlier in the application that you want to work towards solving. It is pretty short. There's a 500-word maximum, and that has to include a problem statement, a proposed solution, which is where you'll spend the bulk of your time writing, and then a look at major obstacles or implementation challenges. So even if you don't want to go into a career writing policy, if you do want to make some sort of change, and remember that's what Truman is looking for, not just people who want to go into a career field and do the job that already exists well, they're looking for students who want to go into a career field and change it. So people who see a need that is currently not filled, see a change that needs to be made, and then work to make that change in order to better serve people. And often policy is part of that. So if there is a policy that could help you to make the change that you want to make easier or better, or if there's a current policy that is a roadblock that could be changed, those are the types of things you can write about in a policy proposal. Truman does not give preference to policy at the local, state, or national level, so you can really craft a policy at whatever level is going to be the most meaningful for the issue that you want to work on. And then the last part of the application is 3 letters of recommendation. Now these are very specific letters of recommendation. They are not letters that are more general that discuss what a great student you are and what a great leader you are, that sort of thing that you might see in perhaps like a rec letter with a graduate school application. These are very specific. So one is about your leadership ability and potential. So your writer of that letter will need to have intimate knowledge of who you are as a leader and your potential to continue to be a leader. The next one is about a commitment to a career in public service. And then the last is a letter that discusses your intellect and your prospects for continuing academic success. That third letter, the academic success letter, really needs to come from a faculty member who has taught you, who really knows you well, typically in your major. The other 2 letters, unlike some other scholarship or fellowship competitions, may not necessarily come from a faculty member. They might come from someone that you've worked in a nonprofit with, or has overseen internship, or a student organization that you're in charge of. We'll talk about who your recommenders should be and who would be best to write each of those 3 letters for you. It may be faculty members, but keep in mind that it may not be outside of that academic success letter. You absolutely want to choose these wisely. Your recommenders should know you very well beyond just your resume. With Truman, it is much more meaningful that your letter writers demonstrate that they really know you, they know your goals, they know your potential to be successful in your graduate program and then beyond, not just that they have a fancy title. So if you really know the president of the university, we'll use him as an example, if you really know the president well, maybe you're a Blue Coat ambassador and you've worked very closely with the president, he knows you quite well, you've had many conversations, and he would be an amazing rec letter for you, fabulous. Then ask him to write a letter for you. But if you've only met him in passing and he doesn't really know you and you're just thinking, well, to have his signature on that letter as president of the university would be impressive, not so much for Truman. They would rather have someone who doesn't have quite as fancy a title, but who knows you well and can speak to who you are rather than just a nice title. So keep that in mind. The person has to be able to fulfill the requirements of the letter. And also, as with anything that you're applying for with national scholarships and fellowships, high school teachers, family members or family friends, character references basically hold little value here. And so usually you don't want to seek out recommendations from those types of connections that you may have. We've already talked a little bit about deadlines and the process that you should let me know in the fall. That's not on the slide, but do let me know in the fall if you're planning to apply for Truman so that I can open up the full application and give you access to that. And then your deadline will be in mid-January. You'll notice this deadline has already passed. It says it's January 13th of 2020. If you're a junior next year, you'd be applying, of course, by January of 21. If you're a freshman right now, it could even be the year after. But whatever year it is that you're applying, that complete application, totally finished deadline is in January, usually right after we come back from the break, 4 classes. We'll look at all of the completed applications, decide who will receive those up to 4 nominations for UWG students, and then let you know that you can submit to Truman. And we'll also include a letter that goes along with that, the nomination letter. Once students have been selected as semifinalists, usually there's a handful of maybe 3 to 5 students from each state each year that are selected as finalists, not semifinalists, excuse me, selected as finalists. There's an interview process where you will interview with people from Truman. And then from there, whoever's interviewed, out of those interviews, they select 1 Truman Scholar per state per year. Occasionally there will be 2 from a state. If they decide to do a regional award, say an award for students from the southeastern U.S., but typically they only do 1 per state per year. So Truman is pretty competitive. At the time that I'm recording this on March 30th, we do have a Truman finalist who has had her interview, and we are waiting to hear back about that decision for whether she's received Truman or not. So this is something that, even though it's incredibly competitive, West Georgia students are competitive for. Our students are doing well in this competition. There was a winner last year from the University of North Georgia. So just to give you an idea of what students are actually being selected for this, it's students from all over the state. So this is absolutely something that you can and should apply for if you're qualified and if this sounds interesting to you. You definitely want to make your application stand out because it is quite competitive. The biggest thing you can do, the best thing you can do is this first bullet point here. Know what your goals are, be specific, and be able to write about them. So it's not enough to say, I want to go to law school, I think I want to be a lawyer. You need to say, I want to go to this law school because it's the absolute best place for me to study this specific type of law that I want to go into so that I can make change in this area. And while I'm at this law school, I can study under these people who have done these things. I can join these organizations and take these classes. So it has to be really specific. So not just, I want to go to law school next, but these are my plans. So the Truman application will really ask you to think through what those plans are. So the application process itself is incredibly beneficial because you'll come away with a really good idea of where you want to go to law school or graduate school, whatever that looks like for you, professional school, and you'll know what you want to study and why you want to do that, and maybe what your kind of fleshed out career goals are. So even if you don't come to the Truman process knowing the answers to all of that, it's like we don't know that today, that's okay. Those are the kinds of things you'll develop throughout the application process, which can be really incredible regardless of how far you go in the process. So throughout the fall semester, you'll want to meet with me regularly to go over drafts of both the questions and the policy proposal so that we can make sure that those are exactly how they need to be. You'll want to meet with your recommenders. Make sure that they know not just what you've done in their classes or as you've worked with them, but what your ultimate goals are, what else is on your resume, anything that could be relevant to the letter that they're writing. They'll need to read your essays that you're writing as well, those drafts that might pertain to what they're writing about in the letter. So you'll really need to have conversations with those people throughout the process. You'll also meet with a faculty member to go over the content of your policy proposal. My academic background is not in policy, so while I do have experience with Truman and I'm able to help you through the written part of that policy proposal, you definitely want to talk to a faculty member about the content of that policy proposal to make sure that it is exactly what you want it to be and that everything makes sense and is working the way that you intend it to. If you don't have a faculty member in mind, I can suggest someone, but you may already be thinking of who that would be for you. You can also take your application drafts to the Writing Center. The content that you write is vitally important. With Truman, that's the most important, but you want your writing to be spot on as well and not, full of mistakes and small errors. And the Writing Center can help with that too. And then ask questions. If there's a question that I don't know the answer to, we have a great contact at Truman, and she can help us figure out any weird situations or nuances of the application, anything that we're not sure of. So definitely reach out to me with questions, and then I can reach out to her if we need to. As we close out this webinar, I do want to do some brainstorming exercises. So go ahead and pause the video, grab something to write with, come back, and we'll dig into these questions. Okay, so now that you have something to write with, or perhaps a window open with a blank doc, let's dig into these. I want you to really dream big. So assume you'll earn the degrees, assume you'll have the opportunities to do the work that you want to do, even if those seem like really big, lofty goals. The Truman application is the time to write about those big goals. Like, what could you do if you had all the resources you needed to do it? So let's dive into these questions. After each one, do pause the video, take some time to write your answers, and then resume the video, and you can head into the next question. So our first one, what is your ultimate career goal? Assume that you'll earn those necessary degrees. After you have them, what will you be doing? So pause the video, take some time to consider your answer to this, and then we'll come back together. Okay, I hope you really did pause the video and write a great answer to what your ultimate career goal is, or maybe even just some thoughts about what that might be that you can flesh out later as you think more about this Truman application process. So let's dig into the next question. What is a problem or a need that you want to address in your lifetime? Be specific, okay? So not just, I want to address world hunger, but is there a specific way to do that, or why is that important to you? So think about a big problem or a need that you want to address through your career and kind of your life's work. So go ahead and pause the video. We'll resume in a moment. Okay, wow, we've already written some answers to some big questions. So let's continue. And of course, you can take some time to review your answers later and kind of let all these thoughts percolate and come together. So our next question is, how will you address that problem or need through your career? So basically, you're connecting the first and second question. So go ahead and pause the video, write your answer down, and then we'll come back together. All right, great. Welcome back. I hope you have thought about how those two things connect and that you really are writing down answers, pausing the video, taking the time to write. So here's our next question. What are your next steps after undergrad? Where will you go to graduate school? What degree will you be earning? Why do you want that particular degree program? Think about what you've already written in terms of your career goals and the problem or need that you want to address. Pause the video and take a minute to kind of jot down some ideas of what happens next after undergrad. Okay, welcome back. We have just a little bit more writing to go. Our next question, what makes you a leader now? So this is thinking about where you are currently right now as a university student. What makes you a leader? So go ahead and pause the video, and then we'll come back in a moment. Okay, again, welcome back. Let's move on to our next question. Describe an example of your leadership. So these two questions are pretty close to each other. So you've told what makes you a leader. Now take a moment to describe an example of that leadership in action. So go ahead and pause the video. Okay, welcome back. I want you now to describe a satisfying public service activity that you've participated in. So think back to what you've done as an undergrad. This really doesn't need to go as far back as high school. And take a moment, pause the video, and describe that experience or activity. Okay, let's move on to the next question. We don't have a whole lot left. We're coming up on the end of this. Think about who your 3 recommenders will be and why you would choose them. Think about what they will each uniquely contribute to your application. So take a moment and jot down just some ideas. It doesn't necessarily have to be a list of 3. You could have 4 or 5 people that you're thinking about right now, but jot down a list of who you might ask to be your recommenders. So go ahead and pause the video. All right, great. Now that we're all back together, I hope that you've written down answers to all these questions. That was the last question. So now as you leave this webinar, take some time to read back through your questions and see how they logically connect to each other. Because your Truman application, while it's broken into 14 questions, a policy proposal, and rec letters, it should tell a single story of who you are as both a leader and a change agent. Truman's going to be looking for common threads that are woven throughout your entire application. So if any of your answers feel disjointed or like they don't connect to your other answers, think about how you could revise them so that they do fit together. And remember, you may not simply be revising your writing, you might be reconsidering your larger goals. And that's okay. That's a process that I can help with as well if you have questions there. So please do send me an email, kate@westga.edu, if you have any questions about the Truman process. I look forward to working with you next year, or even now. We can go ahead and get started. That's absolutely fine. I do look forward to working with you as we start your Truman application process. Thanks. Bye.